Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to start this planning commission meeting. It is 6:34. It appears that all commissioners are here except Commissioner Amenta.
Yep.
Who is excused. Has this meeting been publicly noticed?
Yes.
All right, our first agenda item on the roster is approval of March 26, 2019 minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes as recorded.
I'll second.
Motion by Kylie Miller, second by Commissioner Hanson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Next item on our agenda is to consider an application for a zoning review to confirm the side setback at 2500 East Capitol Drive. Business owner David Rosen, Shorewood Animal Hospital. Director Barton.
Thank you, President Rosick. So this is an interesting one. So the proposed, the site in question is located in the B3 zoning district, which has a build-to line on both the front and side yards or setbacks, as it were. And so the build-to line technically requires that the building be constructed up until that point at minimum. However, the building has been developed before that build-to line was established, and so it's existing as a non-conforming structure on that lot, with setbacks both in the front and the side. The applicant has applied to do some renovations of the property, including a lot of interior work, as well as the addition of a vestibule to enter the property, which will extend further along the side setback. Within that review, they asked me to review the setbacks to confirm that everything was in order, and at that point identified that the property actually has build-to line, the setback lines. So the build-to line requires, technically requires that the side of the building be 20 feet from the curb line. However, technically the property line is 20.5 feet from the curb line, so there's a little technical glitch with that at the very least. However, within the code, it does allow the Plan Commission some review authority over that. So the code section says, on corner lots, a build-to line of 20 feet from the street curb line, except that the side yard setback on corner lots, which this property is, shall be reviewed by the Plan Commission to determine whether a 20-foot build-to line or another setback, or another corner lot side yard build-to line is appropriate due to parking considerations and the layout of the intersection. And so with that, the applicant is seeking approval from the Plan Commission to construct a vestibule at less than the 20-foot build-to line. Partly acknowledging the 20-foot build-to line is not even practical because it can't be that way, but whether or not the Plan Commission has issues with not going further or going less is kind of what we're here to discuss. Staff comment, essentially this is getting closer to the build-to line and it's not a complete redevelopment or scraping of the site. So in practicality, this is lessening the nonconformity. So staff has no particular issues with that, but it is the Plan Commission's discretion to review it. If the Plan Commission were to deny it, the code is very clear that the Board of Appeals would hear the appeal based on the parameters of a special exception, which are listed in 535-34E. So just for your reference, it is before the Plan Commission tonight to determine whether or not the Plan Commission sees any issues with the renovation lessening the nonconformity or otherwise.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the director?
And the applicant is here as well.
Hi, welcome. I do have a question, a general question, just for my own education. So does any altercation of a non-conforming use, so if you have a non-conforming building, because it was prior to the zoning code, and all of a sudden any alteration, what's the trigger for making it conform to current zoning?
So that would be if the complete building was removed, the new building would need to be. But that's why we've often seen where they leave one wall standing so that they don't have to fully conform.
So only if it's a redevelopment, it's not like
correct. That's my interpretation.
Adding a second story or a certain dollar amount, right. Or
Nathan could, our attorney could weigh in separately, but that is my understanding is that it has been worked around, so to speak, by leaving at least one member of the structure in place.
That in a nutshell is pretty much what it is. Under the zoning, under state statutes, there's a difference if it's just damaged or destroyed by natural cause, or if there's a renovation that's done. But in this particular case, it's really essentially a moot point, because what they're doing is they're actually amending or changing the property in a manner that actually brings it closer into conformity with the existing code, as opposed to
Right,
more
I get that.
non-conforming. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in terms of, that's pretty accurate representation.
Okay. So it's just complete demolish and rebuild
Correct.
of any of our non-conforming uses,
Structures.
structures, I guess.
Yep.
And then just, and the reason it's coming before Plan Commission,
Just because I needed to confirm the setback, and the code doesn't give the planning director the authority to do that. It says on corner lots, the planning commission shall review to determine, so just based on the code, it's coming
so
straight.
it's
to
not
the
because it's a non-conforming use and it's
Correct.
not complying with full zoning code, it's just the fact that it's.
That's how the code is written. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, yes?
One question. Mark, when I drove past the building, I noticed that there's a fence at the moment along the west facade of the building, maybe a foot off the sidewalk. So this addition, will that new addition kind of come out to where that fence is currently? Just to get a feel for how close it is.
So on page 20 of the packet, there's a survey with a site plan showing where the vestibule would be located, I believe. I don't see the fence actually appears to be beyond the property line. Is that accurate?
It's removed.
The fence, oh, and the fence will be removed, so
It's removed.
it'll be less, it won't go that far though.
No.
So yeah, the current fence is actually just slightly over the property line. It sounds like it's being removed, but the vestibule will not go out that far.
All right, any other questions?
So I'll move to approve the proposed building placement of the Shorewood Animal Hospital located at 2500 East Capitol Drive as submitted in consideration of the layout of the intersection and the fact that the nonconformity is being lessened with this renovation.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you so much for attending. Good luck with the renovation. The next item for our consideration is to further discuss amending the zoning requirements to allow for portions and covered entryways in required front and side yard areas.
That's correct.
Did you want to say more?
I'll just give a brief overview. So based on, so this is meeting number 6, because the previous 4 were under previous planning director and planning commission, so this is actually our second meeting, but for clarity, this is the 6th meeting that's being discussed. So based on my direction last time, I kind of received a clearance to start over with a new draft so that we can all be on the same page of where we're going from. I incorporated primarily the first version because that was more clear for staff to interpret and administer. And so with that, the draft has been provided within the packet on following pages. Page 25, 26, and 27 has the red marked version, print and color if you have access to it, with the proposed changes. With that, I also did include within the memo a list of 7 questions that could guide discussion if the Plan Commission is agreeable to that. They just kind of outline what I've included within the draft and whether or not the Plan Commission agrees with that. That would help me tick off, whether or not there is agreement to move forward. I didn't anticipate that it would be in a perfect state to recommend approval to go on to the board, so just know that I'm not expecting that to be the case. If it is, great. If not, I'm here to hear your opinions of it. And so with that, if we'd like to go through them, or if you just want to open up for general discussion, I can do it either way.
If we could just go section by section, just, I finally realized after reading it that there were 2 drafts, old and new, and one replaced the other. So I'm assuming 25 and 26 replaced 23 and 24.
So the first version I was right, that's the current code.
Right.
So yeah, the first pages
23,
23 and 24, that's the current code. So then 25, the red marks show what's being new or what's being revised or striked out. So there's only one version of a new code. It's the other one's provided for reference of what it currently is.
Okay, so, let's just go section by section, and if there's no comments, we just move to the next section. So the first section is, well, first, it's 535-6, is that correct, definitions?
Correct.
Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions on the definitions? Commissioner Burnett?
I guess I was wondering why the covered entry couldn't have supports. Is that?
At that point, I would deem it a porch with open sides. So when the structures come down at that point, I'm saying it's a porch. So just to differentiate the two, that is how I've
Okay.
drafted it.
Can I ask, is a porch and a deck the same thing?
No.
Okay, so for definitions, we are the title of this is decks, porches, patios, and covered entries, right?
So this isn't the full section of 535-6. These are just the two relevant sections. I can read the definition of deck if you'd like.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
So you just pulled them out. So there is one, and it's going to go under cover. It's going to go under definitions.
It's already within definitions. It's not being changed. So,
So you didn't pull it out.
yep, correct.
Okay. And just in that section, is there any, it says an elevated structure without forming a covered, is there any material requirements or material, is a porch made of wood? Is there any differentiating between that and patio, for instance? For material?
I mean, the difference with patio is that a porch is covered and has support structures open on the side. So material-wise, a porch could be made of, I guess, stone, if they, brick,
Concrete.
yeah, brick, piers.
Just checking. All right. Anybody else have questions on the definitions? If not, we'll move to section 535-9, site restrictions, letter F. Okay.
So that's just a matter of me adding porches into the title of it, in very basic sense in the beginning of it. And then I had to renumber the other items, so decks is being renumbered from 2 to 1 just for formatting sakes. Nothing substantive is changing the deck or patio section, it's just some kind of renumbering and clarification of word usage. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Anybody? Okay. So for patios, we very specific about percentage of covered by the patio, like percentage of the site. We were very, if you look at these criteria, it used to be A, B, C, D, E. Do we have the same thing for decks and porches, or is it just specific to patios?
It's specific to patios. Decks are not allowed in the front yard.
Inches above grade, feet from the street
No,
line.
the only requirement on decks is written above, so decks shall not be located in the front yard or street side yard or the side setback or rear setback of the lot. So
See that.
that's the only requirement is the location of it. There's no percentage.
So that was
That I'm aware of. I could be.
So I don't mind that. I just, when I was, I got really confused because usually if you're regulating 4 things, then typically if they're similar in use, like a patio or, what do we say, a deck or a porch, I don't know which one's which, but they would have similar requirements. They're exactly the same thing, you sit on them. And the only thing is that one's covered, one's not. So if we were redoing this ordinance, I just wanted to know, I wasn't here for when we did piecemeal, and I always look at things whole. So would it make sense to look at the same requirements for the 4 things and see if any of them apply?
I'm open to that. My understanding of the decks not having the coverage ratio is that they're permeable to the ground, so rain, whatever, goes through them, and it's not a solid surface underneath them. Whereas a patio, if it's concrete or full stone, that impacts more stormwater. So I think that's the differentiator of a deck is considered a permeable source, so the coverage was less concerning at the time when this was reviewed. I don't know if anyone's on the panel, at the commission or not. But I think that was the differentiating factor of why a patio specifically was limited in size, because we didn't want to have someone have a full concrete backyard and call it a patio.
But could a deck be, or a porch be concrete? That's the material question I have for you.
A porch could be, and a porch is covered, and so in that case, it's not going to be permeable no matter what you do because it's covered by nature. So, yeah, if that is an issue, I mean, it's only allowed for an 8-foot porch, so I don't think that's going to impact the 30% ratio. So it's covered more so on the depth requirement than it is a percentage. But point well taken, it is adding permeable space to the site.
And even like patios can't exceed 6 inches above the grade in the front yard or side yard. What about decks?
A deck is not allowed in the front or side, so a deck in someone's rear yard has no height requirements. I'm guessing it's just with the grade of the entryway or whatever.
Commissioner Clayton.
Porches were a more complicated structure for us to deal with, and that's why, I think it was a year and a half or whatever, we took out and dealt just with patios at the time, in the front and the side yard setback, because it was just, you know, let's get that out of the way, because it was less complicated architecturally, I think. So the only thing we had left to really talk about was porches.
And decks, because they're different.
I think the decks we'd also discussed, and there actually wasn't too much discussion about.
All right, anybody else on that section? If not, we can go to, oh wait, that was the wrong section, wasn't it? We can go to F3, required setbacks, F3, what was F3? F3, porches and covered entryways.
So this entire section is new, but it's based off of previous draft. So yeah, if there's any questions on any of the sections, if you want to start with setbacks, or start with the definition, I'm happy either way.
And then
the more I thought about it, our discussion about having porches that could extend as far as 10 feet from the front lot line, it started to seem pretty close to the sidewalk to me. And I wondered if we might consider making that 15 feet instead. So, you know, a lot of properties, 25 feet front yard setback, so if you put an 8-foot porch on, you've still got 17 feet. Anyway, just, and every block is different, but just 10 feet seemed a little close.
So, what about the houses that are closer, that it's not fair to them? Because I don't think 10 feet is too close. And if you're in a lot that's not at the 25 step back, which there's quite a few blocks here in Shorewood, give them the ability to also have porches.
do you think 10 is too much?
I don't think it's too much. I'm fine with 10.
Okay, I just,
Yeah.
just checking.
I mean, so if a house is really close to the lot line, giving the appropriate amount of ability to have a porch, just like the person who's set way back, figure out a way to do that in code. But not everybody can have a 30-foot porch, right? Up to the lot line or the setback.
8 feet, so
Right.
Right, so that's how we do that in code.
Yeah, I don't know. Anybody else? Dan?
On that, I have two things, and I can go on that topic first. I think I'm in the minority here, but I think this is a bad idea. I think maybe we needed to tweak, and I know we've talked about this before, it's tough going back and forth, but I think we may need to tweak it. I like it conforming with the rest of the block more, not having outliers that stick out that far potentially, or block someone else's view. I think it was written the way it was before for a reason. And I think this could be a huge change we're undertaking where, you know, again, I know that different blocks are different, but on most blocks, houses are pretty much aligned. We saw examples in the last meeting of ones that aren't, but those are few and far between, and it's not like everybody's coming to us with porches on those. I love porches, we want more, but I think the definition that was before made it fit in more with the neighborhood and didn't get all the outliers of someone sticking a porch that's right next to the sidewalks. That's my opinion. One thing I thought we talked about last time, and maybe you got clarity on this, was in design requirements B1. I know it's been interpreted before that height is, and I know this was on my porch when I built it, that it had to be at door height, not having a step up into the door. I wish I had a step up, and I wish I could have done that. So I don't know what is meant by at door height. You know, it does snow here, and it's nice if when you open your door, the snow's not right there, like if you could have one step up, and maybe that's not right. I just know I wish I had that.
Do you mean you would change the door height? to make.
Yeah,
it
like
so
when I originally, just from experience, I designed mine, I wanted to step up into my front door. I was told I could not do that by the code, that it had to be at the height of the front door. So when you walk into my house, you walk from the porch, there's a threshold about that big, and you're in my house. A lot of porches I see have a step up into the front door. And again, I don't know what the intent is here.
And I'm not sure if there's any code issues with that, but I have no issues if the planning commission is okay with that and the building code's okay with allowing a step up. It could be rewritten to say, you know, it shall be at no more than 10 inches or 8 inches, whatever the typical.
And maybe look at other ones and see what it says. I didn't know if someone put that in there at one point.
No,
Again, there's really nothing that I'm aware of in the uniform dwelling code
Okay.
that covers that step. I mean, it would only have to do with accessibility, which you don't really have in that kind of residential condition. And so I think, I want to say it's 8 inches is the maximum for a step, for a riser.
Great.
So I think that would be the,
So yeah, if there's no accessibility issues where there be a desire to have it at the same level, 8 inches, fine with me, quite honestly.
Yeah, I suppose it's up to the individual homeowner.
Right.
What they prefer, I don't want to restrict them, you know, if they want to step and it's not hurting anyone or anything, go ahead and have a step.
I'd be fine with amending that if there's no other opposition to it.
And if you look and you find a reason why it shouldn't be like that,
Sure.
you know, if you could just look at it.
Yep, we can come back with that.
Commissioner Patel, and then,
I guess I'm in agreement with Dan. I prefer the uniformity over a lot of back and forth on any one given block. And I know there's a desirability of porches. I've never seen anyone use them. I mean, you go around town and people have porches, but there's hardly any use of them, too. So I don't know that,
my block, there's a ton of use, but
yeah, but I prefer uniformity.
Can you just tell me, and I'm just trying to visualize it, what uniformity means? So if you had a house like, say, mine, or someone that doesn't have a big yard, right? And you're allowed a porch, whatever the thing says, and I put my porch there, and then there's a house, you know, the rest of the houses on the block are down the street, so I'm first. So now, I don't understand, all the porches, the next person that wants to put a porch would have to put it in the same line?
I mean, I would like direction on that as well, if there is a specific, whether it's the full block or your two adjacent neighbors.
It gets very,
So I think what we're saying is that if there were 10 houses on the block, and all of them, generally speaking, were in a line.
no one has a porch yet. So
No one has a porch, and they're all basically in the same line. with
So,
parallel and-
go with me here, so I build a porch,
You build a porch,
okay?
but your porch still falls within the restrictions of 8 feet and not closer than whatever, 15 feet,
Okay.
whatever it is to the street.
Right, what house-
Then everyone else can build, they all have the same restrictions all the way down the block.
So what
They
if
have
someone's
8 foot
house, I
footage.
mean, not all houses are exactly in line, so say
Sure.
someone's house was further back, how would the code regulate it to say you need to build yours up to this front house that's out of ordinary?
No, I think less of the one house that's set back, think more about the one house that's set much closer.
I am, and that's the first one that builds. So
Right,
now,
but they currently have the restriction of 8 feet, not closer than 10 or 15 feet
Okay.
to the sidewalk.
but now someone,
Well, that's what this draft, though, with
This
The
the,
block wasn't uniform before.
with the alternate version that we looked at last time, the alternate version would have not allowed them to do a porch because they were in front of their neighbors. So this version is more,
Can you read the other version? It was like 10%, I mean, we had a mean of the, and we got it from somewhere.
it was a modified version of Milwaukee. Milwaukee had 20%, we, planning commission discussed going down to 10. The problem with that is it only allowed for a 2-foot porch, and so at that point it was, in my opinion, it was regulating porches not possible. So, but if you give me 1 second, I can read what that draft said. So, I understand the alternate version. If the plan commission majority would like to go with that, I would need to tweak that as well. But I thought I had direction last time that was not the majority, so that's just where this is coming from. But I can read it.
while you're looking for it, I always have a hard time, so I like uniformity, but we're not a gated community, and sometimes if you're not significantly impeding your neighbors, like solar panels, may block some sunlight, but we allow that through zoning, so it's really hard to regulate a diverse community with different architects. So like the historic third ward, they have a design review board, it works really well because all the buildings are the same. They were built, there was a fire, they were all built at the same time period. So when you apply a design regulation like that, it's easy to implement. But for our community, I'm not sure, you could be correct that most of our streets are exactly, the houses all line up, but from my experience, I haven't seen that, and I would have a hard time putting on the planning director to say a percentage until you looked at every block and made sure that that was a fair way to regulate them, or if there's some harm in someone having a porch with 50% coverage, how much would that block consume? So it's hard in zoning unless the housing stock is very regulated to begin with. Trustee Calderon, and then, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dan.
Although our village is not, was built over a period of time, so not the entire village is uniform, usually each block is. So, but as the blocks differ as you go around the village, my house is almost 100 years old, goes on the west side or Newark. So, after discussing this for 3.5 years, my thinking has shifted to be more in line with what Dan was saying. And I think it comes down again to, regulating light, air, and privacy that I don't want to do. I never want to harm a neighbor by approving something, to lessen the quality of life in one property by approving something in a neighboring property. And so that's where I have an issue. And if we're talking about the design requirements under B2, allowing, say if we allow porches, but then allowing a second floor deck with a railing, we have that experience in our neighbors, especially during the summer months, where now you have a porch sticking out on the second floor, adjacent to the bedrooms and the adjacent houses. So during the summer months, you've got people on those porches, after the bars close, people with their windows open trying to sleep. And then again, you're affecting privacy and noise in the house next door.
From the porch.
From the house porch. We've had that.
Our personal opinions, I get it.
I know, we've had that where you can tell the bars closed and you've got younger people, they're on the porch and you've got your windows open, so you've got that great lake breeze coming in, and I could take dictation because I don't think people understand their voices really carry, especially at 1 in the morning. So uniformity is one thing, that's aesthetically pleasing to the eye to look on the block and have the front facades of just about every house line up on that particular block. So that's one consideration. The other is what does the addition of a porch on one or a couple of houses on that block do to the adjacent houses as far as their light, their air, their privacy, and enjoyment of living in that house. So over time, I think it has shifted. I'm a bit more concerned about the effect throughout the village on different lots.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan?
So ours currently reads 10%?
No.
That was the suggestion we had.
Yeah, so I can read this. So the suggestion was residential districts R5 and R6 specify that the minimum front setback for a principal building in a residential district shall be 25 feet or the average of existing setbacks on the side of the street where the property is located between the two closest intersecting streets, whichever is greater. And then the addition was the front setback may be anywhere in the range of average setback minus 10% the average setback or plus 10%. So if the average setback is 25, it's going to give you 2.5 feet on either side. And so that was just an attempt at modifying the setback. Then the two clauses to allow porches were in a case where portions of the existing structure are closer to the front street lot line than the nearest adjacent buildings, so if your house is further up than your two neighbors, a new porch or alteration to a porch may come up to the portion of your structure closest to the front property line. So if you have 3 feet, you can build uniformly up to that 3 feet beyond, but no further than that. The second option is where the existing structure is set back further from the property line than the nearest adjacent building, so your house is back. A new porch or alteration to a porch shall be permitted within the front setback range or may be placed up to any point between the existing front setback and the setback range. So that's allowing you to go up to your neighbor's area, generally. I would reword some of that, that's my understanding of where that one was going.
So just to give a percent, so now as we're talking about this rewording here, in all of those examples, as long as you're within, we have 10 feet in here, you're good.
As long as you don't get closer than 10 feet.
Right, it doesn't matter what your neighbor has going on.
Correct.
Yeah, and I know it's, again, porches are nice, but these houses, there are architects involved building them, they have, you know, they were built a certain way, and it'd be nice to have porches to all of them. I just don't know if we want to make a decision here that has everybody putting a bunch of porches that extend 8 feet off their house and block their neighbor. I think it's a bigger decision.
I don't quite get the block your neighbor part. So can we just talk about this 50% exterior wall, and why did that get set to be less, so it doesn't feel like a block? Because I'm not blocked by a 4x4 post that comes down and holds up a...
Yeah, it's
a little
open.
This is
bit.
not,
It doesn't block me. My neighbor's bushes block me more than that. So I don't quite understand that reaction. I'm all for porches.
I have an alternative question that might help. If I was a homeowner and I wanted to build onto my house, not a porch, okay? So not an open air where you can see through, but a solid structure.
You're not allowed to do it currently.
Yeah.
In the front, no.
Okay.
That's the problem, is currently it's kind of frozen for most people, is that either enclosed or unenclosed, because the setback is so, it's 25 feet or the average of the setback, whichever is greater, so it rarely lets you go forward.
Okay.
Just
So then
because
it
of
brings
the way
us
that-
to Teresa's question, which is how, and the same thing for hearing, an 8-foot difference of where this thing is going to be located isn't going to, in my opinion, only my opinion, but isn't, by going with your, one formula rather than the other, isn't going to stop the noise from someone sitting outside and you're trying to dictate on your thing. I mean, I want to be careful that we don't over-regulate with an idea in our head that it's going to make a difference for welfare and safety and blocking and view if it may not. I mean, it may not impact it at all.
So yeah, the 50%, that's a continuation of what was recommended, so it's just saying that at least 50% shall be open. So if you had brick piers and you had like a brick, instead of a railing, a brick, knee wall and piers, at some point that might add up to 50%. So the draft that was previously prepared had 50%, we could make it 70, we could make it 80, we could make it whatever.
70 seems more, I mean, it's gonna be,
Right.
the wall doesn't need to be halfway up.
Correct.
And that would block the view, but if you keep the wall, waist to knee, I think the code is waist, sure, the railings.
36
inches.
36
Yeah.
inches, correct.
Depends whose
So,
waist.
And again, within the mesh, I have a question about to go with that. There's a sentence here about mesh screening doesn't count. It does, that feels enclosed as well. So maybe there are things that you can adjust.
that could be removed, that was a carryover as well. If we didn't want to allow the porch to be screened in, that's easily discussed.
Yeah,
Or
I
it
think
could
about,
be that it adds to the 70% or something, I'm just saying that if it makes it feel more enclosed.
so you walk out and you look, in your peripheral vision, you can't even see your neighbor's porches, I'm sorry. You're looking up at least a 30-degree angle. Covered is what we're after here, covered in a space to sit, not so much the walls, and enclosed, because that would block somebody. So maybe an adjustment to the percentage coverage would be helpful.
To pump it up to ensure
To
Openness?
ensure openness. And if you screen it, then you need a door. And the porch shouldn't have a door and be enclosed.
And as I mentioned in the memo, I'm happy to hear these comments, because I can provide illustrations coming back. I can say, this is an existing porch, and it's calculated, this is, 40% enclosed, or 60%, or whatever it is. So it'll give you a better visual of what this percentage means. And so it's just good for me to make a mental note that I need to illustrate this for future discussion.
I think about uses of a porch, so protecting deliveries, like, I just have an overhang, it's called, and my stuff gets wet, Wish I had more, but that's what the house has. And that's what people are really looking for, is small seating area, somewhere for their mail to stay dry and their deliveries to stay dry. And for you to be able to get into your door without getting bombarded with rain or snow. You know, it's a simple, 8 foot isn't that big, you're not putting a dining table out there and having a party. That goes in the back on your deck. So I feel strongly that everyone should have a right to put a porch on their house. It doesn't block it.
And I don't think you're gonna get much more than 50%, or you're gonna be able to up it too much from there, because if you think like a 3-foot rail on an 8-foot opening, you're already at 3/8, and then you have a pier, you know, you're at 50% right there.
So that 50% might have been
It might be
well-
realistic then, okay.
a well-defined number. I was just carrying over from previous competitions when I didn't have that history of, but good point.
Maybe pictures would be helpful, and maybe you guys already did this before, but when I think of, I see, but as Teresa said, I mean, one of my friends is a tiny, it's probably not like 68 feet, but just where they put their mailbox and they put their boots and, you know, a mat and a box from, I remember going up to ring the doorbell and there was a little box from Amazon, but I don't know, I'm not concerned about regulating that it would, most of the time when you hear about regulating front lot lines, it's in Florida, like it's in communities that are like suburbs that are growing, and I learned this in school and I practice, but it's more of those growing communities where there's not many other houses and they're establishing that line. But once that architecture like Shorewood is established, we're a built-out community, denying it for appearance-wise doesn't make sense to me, because there's been many altercations to the houses and the lot lines over time. So I understood it when it was being done in Florida for new suburbs, but here we have bad weather and it's a covered space to enter your house or leave a package, so it doesn't impede anything for me. And I don't know that, I'm not concerned with noise, because maybe 2 people are sitting out there, maybe it's never used just for covered space, but it would be the same if it was 10 feet away. Commissioner Patel and then Commissioner Pyle.
I guess I'm envisioning 2 different things, because you're talking about sort of like the porch a little, but my understanding is it's 8 feet across the whole space of your house if you want it.
It could be.
Right,
There's no
so-
width
Yeah, so
maximums in this draft.
that's what my greater concern is, somebody deciding, hey, I want a porch 8 feet across my whole 60-foot wide home. That's where I was thinking about when I'm thinking like uniformity and space. I'm thinking somebody just going, hey, I want to be like in the South and have a full porch across my house, versus I just want the space to cover, my entryway. That I think is a great addition, but
That can be regulated differently. So if you're worried about width rather than lot line, then you can regulate it to no more than 3/4 of the building, no more than 1/3 of the building. So there is ways to regulate that as well.
Yeah, I would need direction on if there's a maximum that we're looking at, because a lot of times it's based on the architecture of the house, right? So sometimes the porch across the full facade architecturally balances, it looks well. If you've got a longer, wider house, then yeah, you could.
And does the
Limit it,
design
right?
review look at that? I mean, on a case-by-case basis?
They would look at the proportion of the addition, correct? It wouldn't be regulated by code per se, to the point where they could deny it based on, feet or inches. They would be saying proportion doesn't look right, we want you to chop that off, and that they would have the ability to, in their review, to review it architecturally to make sure it matches the proportion of the structure.
Commissioner Kelly Miller and then
Our packet includes a discussion of both covered entryways and porches, and I think maybe most of us could agree that covered entryways are a good thing. I mean, they don't have pillars, so there's several on our block that when you're ringing somebody's doorbell and it's raining like this today, it's kind of nice to be covered. So I don't know if we want to carve it out like we did patios, but maybe we can discuss whether that seems like a great idea to all of us, and so we can kind of check that off the list.
oh, I see what you're saying. I think you did call it out, right?
It is called out, it's just within, it's in the one thing. It sounds like perhaps she's suggesting that we could take that to the board first to pass and then come back. I'd kind of like to wrap it all up in one,
Yeah,
Me
fine.
too.
my opinion.
I just meant it's for the purpose of our.
Sure, for the discussion. Yeah, so for the discussion, that section does have a width saying that you can't go more than 3 feet beyond the front entryway in either direction, so that wouldn't be a full facade, entryway. It's enough to cover essentially, to have a bracket on there and have the roof eaves come down or whatever, so that,
So is it 6 feet total is the maximum? Or
no, it's 3 feet.
Either side,
Yeah.
depending
If
how
you have a
big the door is.
6-foot
Okay.
door or something, then.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 on each side.
And that's completely different than what I'm talking about, which is a deck or a porch, which is a little bit more than that, and has pillars and step up and ring the door.
Yeah, and when, the packet that we had last month with all the photos for illustrative purposes, I mean, like bungalows, there's some houses that was part of the original design. And so I think, again, if we're gonna have any restrictions on how much of the front facade a porch can cover, it has to look good architecturally, so I think it'd be pretty difficult for us to say it can only be this wide or it can only cover a certain percentage. It just has to look good.
And design review is probably looks
Correct, they would review all additions, modifications, etc.
The interesting, and you kind of said it before, maybe in a different way, but a porch is a very permanent structure. It's like, I know that it's not enclosed, and we have these limits on it, but it's not like putting a patio down there or something. It's like putting an addition on your house. And that's why I think these other municipalities have these regulations to make it fit in with the rest of the block, because it can, when I say block your neighbors, I don't mean for sound or things like that. I just mean, you move in somewhere, this is the way the block looks aesthetically, just like we don't allow people to put huge additions on the front of their house because it totally changes up the makeup of the block. I think that's why it's like this for porches, because it's a permanent structure that can totally change the makeup, and depending on the block, 8 feet can be an awful lot to really change the block, and slowly but surely, that could really change a lot of things around the village.
Except the difference would be that it's transparent, unlike walls, to an addition to a house. And I don't know any room that's only 8 feet, extend 8 feet in depth. So I would think that a structural change to a house, like adding rooms, would actually potentially block views and make it look more gigantic. Whereas a porch, I personally don't see a porch making it so much different, the feel of the house. I've never seen a porch that's done right, designed right, feel bulky and like an addition to a house.
Yeah, and I will say, no one in my time here has requested to put on anything larger than a typical porch or small front entryway, because that they realize that the architecture of the house doesn't, match that. So the requests I've received are more so for, small covered entryways or bumping out something that, so we have one on Maryland that they're currently, 2 wooden columns at 2 feet out. They want to go out further than 2 feet. We're not allowed to do that. They want to go to, so just for referencing, maybe it's because it's not allowed, I don't know, but no one has come into my office trying to exceed, a typical entryway or porch, but that would be design review board if it's not regulated within here.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments on that section? I did want to know about mesh screening, just how it doesn't count as enclosed, because I feel like so it's written as 50% of the exterior wall area shall be open. Mesh screening is not considered enclosed. So you could do 50% is enclosed, and then you could have the rest screened in. And I remember from prior conversations, we didn't want screened porches.
Well, if you have screens, that means you have another door. Are you allowed to put another door on your porch? A door on your porch?
That's a great question.
I mean, you could
So then it's a screened porch, but it's
to keep shade, maybe. Some people put down screens.
As long as no more than 50% is enclosed, so if it's a
screen door.
If it's a glass door, that's going to come against your percentage. If it's a screen door, under this version, it wouldn't. But, so that was just kept in from the previous conversations. If there was any history on that discussion, if not, once again, it's all up for consideration. Now,
And the only reason I mentioned that, I just remember, I don't remember if I was in the audience or if I was a new member, I can't remember the time frame, but when there was a discussion about that, people have always been concerned about storage on your front porch. Like, so when you screen it off and you have another door, there's a lot of places in Shorewood, a lot of homes where they were storing things. And I've done that before with water bottles, and I'm sure people don't like that. So, but if you don't screen it, if you don't allow the screening, or if you count that towards your enclosure, open porches in Shorewood tend to not store as much as when you screen them in on the front. Backyard, I could care less, but that
I
one.
think that's a point well taken.
You have to take off the screen. Not allowed. That keeps it from being
Yeah, 'cause
closed
it's not a
in
screened room, it's
and feeling like a
it's
closed
enclosed,
area.
right? It's just, the point is to just cover from the elements, if you want to sit and drink an iced tea or
Something else.
Talk to your neighbors.
or smoke your marijuana, no, I'm joking. Once that's legal.
It's gonna be a while.
Commissioner Whitman.
I would disagree with this one too.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry, I think the only reason why we're even talking about it is because we're saying we might put them out 8 feet, and then you put screens up, and then it looks like it's blocking. I think as porches exist by definition, and by the definition we looked at before, if it's screened in, it's very appropriate. There's a lot of great screened-in porches, old houses with nice doors on them. I think it's really appropriate and fits the definition. So I think, again, we're rewriting something that people put a lot of thought into, and there's a reasoning behind it. That's just my opinion.
That's what happens when you change over.
I did have a question. There's a case on Lake Bluff, I believe, where it's a front, it's not really a porch because it's a trellis that's above, so it's an open structure. And I didn't know how to, and it's fairly new, so it must have been built as a front deck.
Fairly new as in the last year or two, or?
No, fairly new as in probably the last 5-10 years.
Oh, by the school there?
By the school, yeah,
Yeah, they
sort of
put
across
up a
from.
fence and they put up a trellis.
It's attached to the house?
No,
Or is it freestanding?
it's actually at the front door, so it's actually closer to Oakland Avenue.
Is it freestanding or attached to the house?
It seems attached to the house, but it's at the front and it's by the front door. And I didn't know if that was something that is kind of in between. You know, they put up the trellis because it got them over the hump of.
It's not,
a deck
it's
or
not
something.
covered, right?
Right.
But we've taken pergolas, we take building permits for, so it's just smaller than like a pergola type thing.
I think that I would consider it smaller than a pergola,
I can't imagine how that would have gone somewhere, but
yeah. Hopefully I didn't get anybody in trouble.
that's not,
because I think I
especially
do
in the
know who
front,
lives
that's
there,
something
so.
someone would see.
I was just curious, but as a case.
I'd have to confirm.
If that falls somewhere in a, you know, because
Yeah.
when we talk about porches, we talk about an enclosed roof structure.
Mhm.
And this would be all the definitions of an open porch except for it's,
Right.
you know, it's not.
Because that may have been part of the conversation that then drove the
But
patio.
it does have something over the top,
Okay.
it's not fully enclosed.
Be curious to know which house that is.
If we ever
We'll
sell
all
our,
find out later.
I know, right now,
if we ever sell our house and move, I think our #1 requirement is the new house have a screened porch, so I can see the appeal. But for this purposes, I do wonder if it's kind of a slippery slope, because I know people who have then enclosed their front porches, you know, with combination storm screens, so it becomes a 3-season roof. So if we were to allow screen porches, I think we would need to be very specific.
Well, you
Or
can
something
just,
allow
Commissioner
it, but
change
use them as
that.
part of your enclosure, make it
Right.
count towards your enclosure. I mean, so you can enclose, the way it's written, if you just got one word, it would say that you can allow screening, but that counts as a part of your enclosure. 'Cause it-
you could also require that the railings be a certain percentage open, in which case it becomes tougher to enclose.